Are you searching for an open world survival crafting / base building zombie bashing depression fueled nightmare game? Well, sit back and let me tell you about my honest review of Project Zomboid. So I go and buy Project Zomboid on Steam for the respectable price of $14.99. Not bad for a seemingly popular indie title. I open the game and am prompted to complete the tutorial, which seems like a good idea, so away I go. In the tutorial, I learn the basic controls, how to navigate, how to adjust your line of sight. I find a frying pan and end up just wandering around in a group of trees with this freaking pop-up on my screen that I cannot figure out how to get rid of. I finish the tutorial and I go ahead and I start an actual game. People actually looking to play this game, the tutorial is simply not enough. It teaches you basically how to control the character, and beyond that there is absolutely nothing of substance here aside from like how to scavenge and kill zombies, which I realize is a huge part of the game, but there's a whole bunch of stuff I will go into later that the game simply does not teach you inside of this tutorial. I go to start a new game and I'm greeted with all of these different options that I can play through. There's scenario modes, 2 of them it looks like, and there's a custom sandbox mode, and then there's a whole bunch of challenges which I haven't explored to this point. I chose to do the 1 week later scenario for casual players just to see if I could get a handle on the game, and I did choose to play in normal mode because obviously I'm a freaking man. Now the one thing I really don't understand or have a real grasp on is going to be like the talents that you can choose from when you first start the game. There's a whole bunch of different options and it looks like it operates on sort of a point system. So you have X number of points when you first start a game that you can allot different skills into. If you go negative, it's not going to allow you to start, so you have to have something that counterbalances that, like some sort of weakness. It's a cool system that I just kind of need to get more familiar with. The 2 playthroughs that I've got so far under my belt are just simply not enough. There's way too many options. And so there I am in my first playthrough. I'm in a house inside of a kitchen, it looks like, and I'm starting to familiarize myself with the UI. So in this game, the UI is a little bit tricky, I found. There's a lot of like dancing around that you have to do in order to manage, your loot interface and your inventory, both of which are the gray bars in the upper top of the screen. Eventually I did get used to this, but it is kind of weird, in my opinion, having to hover really close to the top of your screen in order to access all this stuff, but whatever. The game does operate on a carrying weight system. Everything that you pick up does have a weight to it, which later on, once you start really starting to gather things, this becomes kind of a pain point since your weight that you start off with is very low, although I'm sure inside of that tech tree we mentioned earlier, there is a way to offset that. It probably operates off of strength or something, but I have no idea. And in the right hand corner of the screen, there is this little raccoon looking thing with a more in-depth tutorial. It looks like I made the mistake of not clicking on that and going through that at least 1 time. So I realize I'm kind of operating with a handicap here, but putting that aside, I still had a good time. Eventually I've had enough of looting this house and I make my way outside. The outdoors in this game is very, very unforgiving. 1, you can make noise depending on if you're walking, running, carrying too much. Like there's a lot of variables there. And you don't want to make too much noise because then the zombies are going to hear you, and the more zombies that hear you, the worse time you're going to have. Another very important lesson that I learned here is definitely don't just head into the trees if you're not done like scavenging and stuff, because once you're kind of ingrained inside of the forest, good freaking luck getting out or seeing anything. I swear I was wandering around in the freaking forest for like probably 20 minutes. I had absolutely no idea how to get out of here. Finally, I managed to escape and I found myself heading towards civilization once again, and that brings me to one of the first things I really want to talk about here, and that is going to be the combat system. Without a weapon, really your only defense here is going to be shoving a zombie down and beating it while it's on the floor, which honestly is kind of cool. It makes like a little satisfying death sound when the zombie dies, and if you do have a weapon, that's obviously more effective than using your hands. I do take a small issue with the way that the combat takes place though. You have to very specifically be facing the zombie when you hit it. I mean, I know obviously you have to be facing things in real life when you hit them, but for the sake of the game, like it makes it a little tricky. Like if you're standing on top of the zombie and you try to hit it, sometimes it won't connect and your character just kind of starts swinging around in midair. It's one of those things that you're really gonna experience in order to feel out. It's very hard to describe, but it was a little weird and hard to adjust to at first, but if you give it time, it'll eventually be a lot more comfortable. And as I expected, this playthrough did not last long at all, as I end up succumbing to my wounds and dying dying, ultimately turning into the very things I was seeking out to kill in the first place. End of playthrough 1. So then begins my second attempt at this wonderful, wonderful game. So this playthrough, I spent a little bit more time trying to stay in the residential areas, collecting as much stuff as I could, again running into the weight issue that I had touched on earlier, and that's really where it started to become a problem for me. I became super over encumbered and was able to move very, very slowly, and it became kind of a delicate balancing act of stuff I wanted to hang on to versus stuff that I didn't necessarily need. And as a new player, it's not super clear right off the bat what you actually need to hang on to. So I was basically picking up anything I could find. I was afraid of starving, I was afraid of dying, so I just kind of hoarded everything I possibly could. Backpacks and carrying things can be sorted into different tabs later on once you end up finding those types of things. So once you have a bag to put stuff in, it kind of splits your inventory in half. And then anything you put in the bag also has a reduced carrying weight. So that kind of solves that problem a little bit. And I would imagine there's really good bags that you can find later on in the game. I made my way around and eventually I discovered keys to a car inside of an abandoned house, which I then used to start the car, and I drove it exactly one house over before I was scared of alerting the horde nearby. So then I promptly shut off the car and went back to looting. The biggest problem I had with this playthrough is there's a lot of different things that can overcome you. I think that's the best word to describe the situation I was in. I was super fatigued, I was depressed, I was anxious, and all of these things got really, really bad. And then at some point I ended up going to sleep and my health just completely depleted and I was in critical condition when I woke up. I have no idea how that happened. There's probably like a bandage or something I forgot to change before I went to bed, but that gives you kind of the scope of the things you need to pay attention to. Maintaining your health is very, very important here. Ultimately, all this ended up leading to my death, so as expected, second playthrough, I was dead. So overall, in terms of should you buy this game or not, I definitely think that if you're into the whole survival craft, plot out your survival experience, I definitely think it's a must buy, especially at 15 bucks. You really don't have a lot to lose there. Just be willing to watch a lot of YouTube videos and like look at the wiki and stuff. That'll give you definitely everything that you need to know, but overall, this is a buy from me. The graphics are super scaled down, so you don't need an insane gaming rig in order to run this, and it's very apparent that there's a lot that you can do here. If I had to rank the game, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best game I've ever played, I would probably give it a solid 6.5. Things could have been made a lot clearer, but then again, I did skip that little tutorial raccoon thing off to the side, so I guess I can only blame myself. If you've played this game, let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Also, liking and subscribing definitely does help out the channel quite a bit, so feel free to do that. I shall see you all in the next one. I hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.